Let's talk about airspace and how as an instrument pilot you would know when you are in controlled airspace. And of course, as you know, controlled airspace is airspace in which you would have to file an IFR flight plan and get a clearance from the controller before flying in instrument weather conditions. So as an IFR pilot, you'll want to be able to determine whether or not you are in controlled airspace. So let's lead off with how Class G or uncontrolled airspace is shown on IFR low altitude en route charts. And to do that, let's take a trip up to Alaska. Take a look here on this Alaska low altitude en route chart. You don't see much uncontrolled airspace, G airspace, on low altitude charts covering the lower 48, but you do see it more often up in Alaska. This brown area on both sides of Victor 480 southwest of Fairbanks is Class Golf or G uncontrolled airspace. Any airspace that is not Class G airspace is controlled airspace. All the rest, the area in white, is Class E airspace, controlled airspace. Most of us aren't really used to thinking we're seeing controlled airspace on a low altitude en route chart because nearly all the chart is Class E airspace and is shown in that white. As an IFR pilot, you'll want to know that Class G airspace is airspace where air traffic control does not control air traffic, because there's not enough traffic to cover the expense of providing separation service. You'll remember from our earlier discussion that it's pretty easy to figure out where Class Bravo, Charlie, and Delta airspace is using an IFR low altitude en route chart. But now let's talk about some controlled airspace that is not shown on an IFR low altitude en route chart. And to do that, let's take a look at the sectional chart south of Barrow, Alaska. Notice when we get there, we see some patches of uncontrolled airspace on the distinct side of this blue border. The distinct side of the blue line indicates where uncontrolled or Class G airspace goes from the surface all the way up to, but not including, 14,500 feet MSL. With few exceptions, all airspace 14,500 feet MSL and above in the U.S. is controlled airspace. On the fuzzy side of the blue border is Class E controlled airspace with a floor of 1,200 feet above ground level. We're not used to seeing the blue shading on sectionals, especially in the lower 48, because there are very few areas where the floor of Class E airspace is 14,500 feet MSL. Usually, Class E starts much lower. So as we go north from this little patch of uncontrolled airspace, in this whole area, the floor of controlled airspace is 1,200 feet AGL. Now, as we move on north, things begin to look a little different. As we get closer to Barrow Airport, we come first to the blue compass rose around the Barrow VOR. Then we have a pink band circling the airport. Notice there is a distinct side of that pink band and a fuzzy side. Outside the distinct side, the floor of Class E controlled airspace is 1,200 feet AGL. But on the fuzzy side, the floor of controlled airspace is 700 feet AGL. That's called a transition area. It's an extension of the floor of Class E controlled airspace down from 1,200 feet to 700 feet AGL, so IFR airplanes can climb and descend within the safety of controlled airspace. Going closer to the airport, you see this dashed line going around the airport. Now you'll recall that the magenta dash circle is a Class E surface area where Class E airspace extends upward from the surface. If the airport has a control tower, the circle is a Class D surface area and it's shown as a blue dash circle instead. On the test, they may ask you about a transition area. This pink shaded area is a transition area. Transition areas are Class E airspace extending from 700 feet above the surface and terminating at the base of the overlying controlled airspace in conjunction with an airport that has an instrument approach. Whether or not an airport has an instrument approach affects the floor of controlled airspace. In a minute, we'll talk about how airports with instrument approaches are shown on the low altitude en route chart. But first, let's take a look at an airport that does not have an instrument approach. An example is Topton Air Estates Airport, northeast of the Meridian Vortex in northern Mississippi. Notice both the airport symbol and the text giving you information about the airport are shown in brown. And that means that Topton Air Estates does not have an instrument approach. Now let's take a look at how an airport that does have an instrument approach is shown on an en route chart. An example is at Butler, Choctaw County Airport. Notice that the airport symbol and the information about it are both shown in green. The green means that this airport does have an instrument approach. Now let's look a little further west at Meridian Key Field near the Meridian Vortex. And now you'll notice that the symbol and information for it is shown in blue. Airports shown in blue also have instrument approach procedures. The difference is that airports shown in blue have approach procedures or radar approach minimums published by the Department of Defense in a high-altitude flight information publication. Some military flights may only be able to use approach procedures at blue airports. But you, as a civilian pilot, will be able to fly a published instrument approach to an airport shown in either green or blue. Now let's head over to Utah and take a look at a question you may be asked. You might be asked to use an en route chart to answer this question: what type of airspace exists above Wayne Wonderland Airport? This is approximately halfway between the Hanksville and Milford VORs, from the surface up to 1,200 feet AGL. So let's work through our answer choices and eliminate the incorrect ones. They will give you an option of Class Delta. We know that there is no Class Delta airspace at Wayne Wonderland, because there's no letter D in a box following the airport name. The next answer is Class Echo, and I know you already have this figured out. We know there's no Class Echo airspace at the surface at Wayne's Wonderland because the airport symbol and information are shown in brown. The brown font means there are no instrument approaches to this airport, so there is no need for a Class E surface area. Finally, the last choice C, is Class Golf. We've eliminated the first two choices, and it's obvious that this airport has Class Golf G airspace at the surface. Wayne Wonderland is in Class G airspace, and the overlying airspace is Class Echo for this airway, Victor 244. Airways are Class E airspace starting at 1,200 feet AGL unless the airway is given a customized floor of a different altitude. So now you understand a little bit more about the mystery of reading airspace on IFR low altitude en route charts.